Chapter 38, On the Mend. On the Mend. Amkithran was just as they had left it, parched and desolate under the late flame-rule sun, a barren blot of pale buildings in the sepia landscape. Teeming clouds of desert crows were picking over the piles of refuse that had been left to mount in the streets, the sour tang of rotting food carried to them on the warm air. The Balspan camp was much expanded since they had departed, while more abandoned homes within the village showed signs of occupation, fences pulled down and doors of neighboring houses taken for firewood, blankets nailed over the yawning doorways by the subsequent occupants. More mercenaries had heeded Balthazar's call, just as more children had heeded Melisandre's. Frithha did not find either thought a comfort. First things first though. Frithha turned to make for the Balspan encampment that now sprawled outwards into the sands themselves. The camp held a sense of permanency it had not had before, a paling of thick wooden stakes likely taken from the abandoned village's fences providing a secure ring about the perimeter. Many of the tents had been merged and dug in to make larger dwellings, lines of laundry strung between and rippling in the slight breeze.
"Seems there've been some changes since we left," muttered Imoen behind her. "Still, at least within a paling we won't have to take a watch."
Frithha did not bother to turn to see the scowl that would follow.
"We're not camping here, just follow my lead."
The men at the barricade let them through the eastern opening without question and the group traveled the winding path between the tents. Frithha was heading for the large clearing that had been left in the center and the blonde figure who was there making account of some recently purchased supplies, the man and woman with him straightening at their approach. He was still in the same pale brown robes, though his sunburn had faded to a deep tan that made his hair seem all the whiter. There was something more about him too, a firmness that had taken over from the fidgeting of their last meeting as he turned to meet her address, pale eyebrows arched in surprise.
"Greetings, Lucaille." "Frithha." "And?"
The headman paused, clearly trying to recall Imoen's rattled introductions.
"Your companions,"
he finished, moving quickly on.
"My greetings. When you departed, I did not expect to see you here again."
Frithha inclined her head, allowing the smile to flicker at the edge of her mouth, tempered by graver matters.
"It was ever our hope to return, though perhaps not a surety. Did Melisandre tell you of our mission in the desert?" "No, only that I was to help you as I could. Is there some problem?"
Frithha did not answer, the pair behind him shifted. Lucaille needed no further prompt.
"Come, perhaps we should speak in my tent, though it is not large enough for you all."
A glance behind confirmed 6 stony faces and no immediate offers to be left out of the proceedings. They were never ones to make matters simple.
"I will remain here with the men,"
offered Solafane eventually, volunteering his fellow males much to their silent displeasure. Frithha sent him a firm nod, he was ever her second. Lucaille's tent was not far, set in the southern edge of the clearing they were stood in, the space beneath the draped rugs and canvases cramped, but pleasantly dim after the glare of the desert. What little bedding he owned folded away for the day. A chipped pot of what proved to be cold tea was resting upon an unturned bucket and the man served out 4 cups, well, 2 cups, a small bowl and a pickling jar, as the women removed their boots and settled on the rugs beside him. Frithha eyed the dark liquid. Unlike wine, tea did not tend to improve with age, but her worries proved unfounded after that first watery mouthful. The blend was all stalks and dust. She doubted there were more than 4 leaves in the whole pot.
"Simon's best, I am afraid,"
he apologized at Imoen's grimace to that first insipid sip.
"There is more demand for the alcohol he imports than tea. I am surprised some days he manages to bring in enough to keep everyone fed." "Yeah, we had noticed you've expanded,"
said Imoen, braving another sip to add.
"When did the rest of these Balspan arrive?" "They have been coming in dribs and drabs since you left. Some mentioned a camp to the north which fell, others have been hiding since Saradush, making their way here carefully to avoid patrols.
Lucaille sighed over his own cup, eyes distant as he gazed past the sloping patterned walls.
And the news they bring is disturbing, towns all but closing their gates and brother turned against brother in a hunt for Balspawn. Much longer and I fear this land will tear itself apart. But I try to hold such thoughts to myself and keep hope alive here as Melisande charged me. Keeping a camp of this size supplied must be difficult,
offered Jaehaera, a certain respect to her tone at what he had managed. The man merely nodded, too wearied by the task to take any pride in the achievement.
It is, but Simon trades fairly with us, I sometimes wonder if he even makes a profit. Some of those here hunt in the desert, trading hareskins for goods, while others here have made arrangements with the mercenaries, taking in laundry, sewing, and other tasks in exchange for the seemingly limitless coin Balthazar is willing to expend to keep them here.
Yes, agreed Frithia slowly,
I had noticed ours is not only the group to have expanded.
Lucaille's young face was marred by a sudden frown.
Indeed, and I must say here, I am glad you have returned. A few of the newer merc groups brought trouble to us a while back, tried to force their company on some of the women, the results were unpleasant. 10 days back, a group of ladies arrived with one of the merc groups and set up shop in the inn. There has been no trouble to speak of since, but the truce between our two groups is a tense one, hence the need for our fortifications. But I am sure many here will rest much easier with you returned.
Frithia nodded, making a show of setting down her cup to give him her full attention, as one leader to another.
You have done well here, Lucaille, and I know Melisande is proud, it is always the way of us children to endure. The lady herself sent us on a quest. She knows who the five are and has tasked us with killing them. We left Amcathran to destroy the Dragon Lord who made its home in the deep desert.
Lucaille gave this declaration the required awe.
Ilmater's mercy. A couple mentioned they had seen dragons flying over the edge of the desert, but to have faced one. But our fight is not over yet,
continued Frithia.
Melisande met us afterwards and with grave news. Tell me, has she returned here at all since we left? I'd like to know if her orders have changed.
But the man was shaking his head, body leaned forward and eager at any mention of his savior.
No, no, I'm afraid not. Why? What has Melisande told you?
Frithia ignored the questions.
And you have no way to contact her?
The slightest hesitation and the man was firm once more.
No, none.
Frithia eased herself back, gravely assessing his earnest frown. Her suspicions were faint enough to keep her on course.
Well, fair enough then. We all must continue as she first planned. Lucaille, I will be blunt, Melisande has learnt of an attack that is planned by the Tethiran army. Even now they gather on the other side of the marching mountains, the crossing to be aided by Balthazar's monks. They plan to strike here without warning, you would be slaughtered to the last man. True gods! Are you sure?
Behind her, Imoen nodded on cue, Jaehaera venturing to add,
Indeed, now you see why we did not wish to have this discussion before the others here. If this news is not handled with care, there could be panic, the last thing any of us would want.
Poor Lucaille was still reeling, the man leaning back from them, too dazed to speak. Frithia waited for her moment, poised for that final blow.
I know it seems grim, brother, but all is not over yet. Melisande has arranged a haven for you and the others here. You are to go to the High Temple to Ilmater in Kalimport, the Church of Saint Bavna the Martyr, just on the edge of the docks. Travel under the guise of pilgrims, a red string about the hand will serve well enough as a holy mark to convince all but the faithful, though try to have your people act the part, if you can. The temple is well known to attract pilgrims and I doubt you could miss the place, the roof is a shine with 10,000 polished blue tiles for the tears. She wept at the fall of Arakap, a fitting place for our own savior to meet you, yes.
Frithha smiled, not awaiting an answer and pointing back up the bluffs she knew stretched north beyond the thin canvas walls, to where they had first arrived in Amcathran so long ago.
Take the road west along the desert's northern border to the first oasis and travel across on the caravan routes. Go quickly and have care, Melisande needs you all there in one piece.
Lucaille was still fixed upon where she had gestured, the old apprehension creeping in.
She trusts in you to guide them, Lucaille.
The man straightened imperceptibly, some light that was not there before sparking within as he turned back to her.
And I will not fail her. We will remain here tonight, and break camp before the dawn. Thank you for bringing this to us.
He did not wait to see them finish their tea, the man suddenly on his feet and throwing back the tent flap, his voice ringing out as he stepped into his sandals and stalked back across the clearing.
Esther, go up to the well and then comb the village, send any you find back here at once. Velis.
Frithha watched him with a smile, lingering before the tent for Imoen and Jahara to pull on their boots.
Good work, you two,
she muttered, raising her voice for the benefit of their waiting friends and the man currently sending orders across the encampment.
Come, we can make our camp on the bluffs, they'll only disturb us in the morning when they leave.
Frithha still had the lead as they left the camp and set out north up the slope to find some pitch above the village. Behind her, Imoen was quietly detailing their exchange to Valigar and anyone else who cared to listen. Jahara left the girl to her tale, hurrying her pace to catch Frithha, her tone carefully neutral, though the wary cast to her eyes belied it anyway.
That was a risk, Frithha, moving them on. If Melisande returns here or if she has a way to contact them.
Frithha voiced what she would not.
Then she'll know something's amiss, yes. A lot's at stake, I know, but we can't just leave them here as bait.
Behind her, Imoen snorted audibly. Frithha sighed.
I know I seem to risk our lives without a care, but at least we chose to come here. Whatever Melisande's plan for them, it will not be good. They deserve a chance to survive this as much as any.
Indeed, agreed Jahara, she could hardly argue with that, the woman continuing curiously,
and where did you hear of the temple to Saint Bhavna?
Frithha felt the smile creep in.
Khalid told me of when he used to go down to the docks to watch the sun rise over the harbor, and how the light would burst as it struck that great glass dome.
The girl sighed, suddenly wistful in memories of a man whom she would have been more than proud to call father.
He helps us still.
Jahara merely nodded.
That he does.
They made camp in the scrubland overlooking the village, the sun sinking at their backs to plunge the gorge in deep shadow and bathing the bluff in a dull bloody light. Imoen watched Frithha finish her own tent, the girl's offer to help Inomen with his being expectedly ignored. Imoen turned away as the guilt squirmed. She hated feeling like this, stubbornly clinging to an anger she knew she should have long since let go.
Missing your friend?
Imoen turned to the man behind, trying to harden her heart to those knowing brown eyes.
No.
Valigar shook his head.
When are you going to forgive her? When you can shoot straight. Imoen. I know,
she sighed, even a glance to that shattered hand doing nothing to fuel her righteous anger,
it's just easier with someone to blame.
Not even Jahara could be bothered to cook that evening, their meal consisting of the last dried rations they had brought from the Amma and shared about the fire. Imoen watched the larger camp far below, tents looking small and huddled against the red desert. It held a more nervous look than the encampment they had approached that afternoon and its cheerful air of industry, and she wondered if the people within were the same. If Lucaille held the sway he seemed to attribute to himself, they would be setting out tomorrow, a final trek across the desert. It would not be easy in their greater numbers. They should split into smaller groups, but too small and they would face other risks. Bandits prowled the desert for those with coin, and slavers waited for those without. Imoen turned away before she could finish counting the tents. Not all of them would likely survive, but a chance was better than nothing.
So,
opened Jahara to the dusty floor,
have we any plans for the evening? All I desire is sleep,
chuckled a heat-weary Minsk. Across the fire, Solafane leaned in, his whispers stirring the curls at Fritha's ear. A look between them, brief, but full of weight, and the girl returned to the circle.
I was thinking about heading over to the tavern.
Dark eyes caught Imoen's above the flames.
Fancy showing off your new hair?
The girl both did and didn't, anger at the tentative offer wrestling with the desire to put this distance behind them, Imoen's internal struggle cut short by discreet poke in the ribs. A glower to the man next to her, Valigar maintained an innocent air. Imoen threw a scowl to her boots.
Yeah, all right.
Both girls heaved themselves to their feet and those about them seemed to know enough not to offer any additional company, an awkward silence holding them as they fell into step and set off down into the village. It seemed to take an age to reach the place, or perhaps it was just the idea she should have been saying something that was pressing on Fritha. Fitful gusts of wind scattered dried peelings and other refuse along the dusty streets, the once neat village gradually falling to decay as the mercenary forces there expanded. Every other house was occupied, men gathered in the doorways playing dice and drinking, games that frozen as they watched them pass with eyes that appraised all they saw in terms of predator or prey. At the inn, the courtyard was not so busy for the hour and there were a couple of vacant tables left, the lingering heat keeping most inside the building. After almost 2 days in the desert, Fritha was not feeling the heat as she once had and they took a table by the low wall at the southern end of the square. A moment or two sat there in silence showed them that whatever servers the place had were being kept busy inside.
No waitress, then,
offered Imoen bluntly. Fritha was already halfway from her chair.
I'll go to the bar for them. What do you want?
Imoen wasn't listening, the girl suddenly on her feet and waving madly to the small group of monks walking along the street next to them, a petite, dark-skinned girl with a crop of black hair at their head.
Oh, it's Yemi. Hey Yemi.
The girl turned at her name, the 3 hooded figures gestured to wait where they were while she and another woman of a slightly paler coloring and angled hazel eyes made their approach. Yemi's mild smile of recognition belying the curtness to her words.
Imoen and Fritha,
the girl herself supplied. Yemi acknowledged it with a nod.
Yes, greetings both. So, you've been out of the monastery?
Continued Imoen, all enthusiasm for this distraction.
Were you doing something in the desert? We were training. Gura and I are instructing the younger acolytes in the ways of the sands.
And their presence there at the tavern had not gone unnoticed, one of the men from a nearby table finally glancing up from his drink to mark them.
Oh, sounds mysterious,
giggled Imoen.
Have you been out all? Ha, what you doing here? Your lot don't approve of the drink. Or any other earthly pleasures,
sneered his friend, fist smacked against palm in a crude intimation of the thing. Imoen frowned.
Here, I've a spell for you, lads, Bigby's oscillating hand. Give your wrists a rest, eh?
The girl ignored the sudden explosion of noise, shouts, and further insults drowned by the laughter from other tables, Imoen turning politely back to her impassive visitor.
Pigs, ignore them, Yemi. We do. You were away from the village for a time. Yeah, we had something to sort out, but we're back for the moment. Here.
Imoen continued, patting the low wall between them.
Why not sit and have a drink with us? You don't have to have ale.
Yemi seemed torn.
No, we should go. Thank you, though, for the offer.
A brief smile in return to the one sent to her, and they continued their path north. Imoen watched them go with great interest. Fritha knew she just didn't want to turn back to her.
I'll go fetch our drinks.
The tavern was packed, the rickety staircase that led to the upper rooms now occupied by a row of heavily painted women, Fritha assumed were the enterprising young ladies of whom Lucaille had spoken. She hardly had time to appraise them for long though. The girl had well perfected the art of getting served by now, however busy the bar, and it was not long before she was crossing the courtyard again, ale jug heavy in one hand, 2 clay cups stacked in the other. Imoen was picking at some loose splinter on the worn table and did not look up as the cups were set down.
Here we are,
Fritha trilled, fighting to keep the sigh from it and serving their drinks to settle opposite once more. And silence. Imoen was bent over her cup, apparently mesmerized by the contents, the girl's scalp still stained in patches from the henna. It could not hold Fritha's interest for long. The girl leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. There was so much to regret she sometimes didn't know where to begin to fix it. Perhaps she should not bother, it would likely only break again once Imoen found out about the next lot of lies. Or should that be the last lot? Fritha couldn't see there being much time or need left for falsehoods after she told them she was going to be exploding into ball. How much easier to forget. The warm air stirred her hair, bringing with it the arid, beaked smell of the desert, and she tried to imagine that place as it had been with people walking home from a hard day working the land or trading, a few stopping to take an ale with friends before they returned home to their families for a meal about the hearth. The din from the tavern was hardly helping her reverie, though she had to admit, it was better to listen to than the noisy retching of some poor sot in the alley next to them.
So,
Imoen began at length, eyes still trained on her cup as she lifted it for a drink.
We're out then. So it would seem,
Fritha answered, deciding they may as well air their troubles now they were speaking again.
How's Valigar's hand? How do you think?
Came the predictable snap, the girl's voice softening to add,
but, it's healing.
Another pause between them, and when Imoen spoke again, held the air of a question long in the pondering.
Fritha, do you think we would have been friends if not for Candlekeep?
Fritha just held back the sigh.
And where's this come from?
Imoen shrugged.
When we died, after Sultana Cellar, I saw you in the plains, well, a spirit that looked like you anyway. That's what it said, that we wouldn't have been friends had we not been forced together.
Fritha really didn't know what to say to that. Imoen did not appreciate the pause.
So? Well, I don't know, Imoen. But we never would have had a chance to be friends if we had not met. You cannot pick apart the past so neatly. We were raised together and we are friends. We are still friends, Imoen.
The girl sighed, settling down her cup finally to meet her gaze.
Yeah, but not like we were. You've changed. So have you. Yeah, but... But what?
Snapped Fritha, sick of this cool blame.
I suppose you preferred it in Candlekeep when I was chasing about after you, ever jumping to your whims. You never, we were just kids. Oh really? Because I recall a time much later when I spent a 10-day in the gate playing second fiddle to some backstabbing thief.
Imoen swelled.
I can't believe you're bringing that up. Why not? You're not the only one who can hold a petty grudge. Petty grudge? Valigar could have lost his hand. Yes, and why are blaming me?
Imoen drew breath to shout her next, holding it for an instant of pink-faced bluster before it was released in a deep, begrudging sigh, eyes dropping back to her cup.
You're right, what happened to Val's, it wasn't your fault. I needed someone to lay it on and you let us there.
Imoen shrugged.
It was easiest to blame you.
Fritha snorted and drew a sip.
It's all right, I have broad shoulders.
For a while silence held them. Fritha gazed into her cup, wishing she had never bothered inviting her. Across the table, Imoen's voice broke the stillness, the girl catching her friend with a slight frown.
You know it wasn't the easiest growing up with you in the keep. The sages liked you better, you were more suited to life there. Well, it wasn't exactly a picnic living with you either. You had never been alone like I had, any disagreement between us and all you had to do was threaten not to talk to me and I'd follow you in anything. And now it's the other way round. You don't have to follow me. Don't I?
Imoen snorted, shaking her head almost bitterly.
The things you do. I might be a ballspawn, but I'm not like you. No, no. No, my arse.
Imoen scoffed.
Fritha, you wrestled a dragon. But not even that. Bree came all this way to help you, admittedly to resurrect Val, but why you? Why did you choose you? We all killed Saravik.
Fritha faltered. She could tell her then, should tell her then, about the prophecy and her place within it, but they were only just speaking again. Fritha sighed inwardly. Dragon wrestling or no, she was a coward.
I suppose I just made a name for myself around Plus everyone already knew I was a ballspawn. We only found out about you after the asylum. Maybe,
the girl considered grudgingly,
but it's not just that. It's like there's this aura about you. People want to follow, and me, I'm just another follower.
Fritha reached out to tug a pink sleeve that no longer matched her hair.
Imoen, you'll never be just anything.
A wary pause brought silence over the table once more as words were considered, weighed and dismissed. Imoen the one to venture.
Are you really still mad about that stuff in the gate? No,
Fritha admitted wearily.
It just showed me something I hadn't been ready to face yet, that being friends did not mean it would always just be us two against the world. It hurt at the time, but now, it's just a normal part of growing up, I suppose. But just because our relationship is different now, doesn't mean we're not friends,
finished Imoen at length.
It was nice though, when it was just us two. When the world was just a library full of sages and trouble just an afternoon's entertainment. Yeah. Remember when Hull told us he had heard Gorion and Winthrop talking about it, and they had decided to let us go to the Beargost Fair?
Fritha felt the old indignation spark anew.
That bastard, that was horrible of him, we were so excited. We even made dresses, admittedly from the fine green linen Master Yanfrei had imported for his new robes.
Imoen snorted.
Honestly, all that fuss, would it have killed them to let us out to a fair or something, just the once? It was all right Beth teaching us how to dance, but we didn't know anything about how to act at those things. Well,
Fritha considered,
it likely wouldn't have much mattered at Beargost Fair anyway, though we certainly raised a few eyebrows at the Ducal Palace. Who knew ladies weren't supposed to laugh aloud, or introduce themselves to strangers? Or belch. I could have probably made a guess at that one,
said Frithha dryly over the girl's laughter.
To be fair, even if we had known the rules, would you have followed them? No,
said Imoen,
but it's nice to know which rules you're breaking. That gathering at Sultanaseller was much more fun, 4 centuries old stick in the muds, the elves know how to throw a party. Do you remember Jahara dancing with Herdalis? True to his word, he did let her lead. Then I got Solafane on the floor. You know, Anomen found him still hiding on the terrace hours later.
Imoen was giggling,
and Minsk introducing Boo to Elsyme. Ari and Herdalis snogging behind the statue of Corellin. Val's getting all embarrassed when I offered to do the same with him. You drinking too much wine, having to be taken into the gardens and being sick in the azaleas.
Imoen breathed a wistful sigh.
Good times.
Frithha smiled. She had found it a long and agonizing evening, but it was much easier losing herself to the lie.
Yes. You know, I think we'll deserve another party when all this is over.
Imoen was instantly on board.
Yeah, we could have a massive one at Val's estate, in the gardens, with fire breathers and acrobats and dancing. And we can invite everyone, Athik and Aruna and Enric and everyone. I'm going to wear green,
Frithha continued absently, drawing the image of it in her mind.
No violet, or maybe. Well, I can decide close to the time. And then, I'm going to travel north, go on a real grand tour with Solafane and you and people who can come and go. I'll travel to the high forest and beyond until we reach the land where there is snow even in the summer, and then I'll decide the next bit when I come to it. You've got it all planned then?
Imoen laughed. Frithha smiled.
Mostly, you. I want to learn more magic, much more. I don't know, I feel there's this potential in me and I'm just wasting it. Is that why you wanted those books?
Asked Frithha. Imoen started.
Books? What books? Back at Abizigal's library, the ones you wanted to take, when you were going on about harnessing the power of the blood. Oh, that,
she exclaimed airily.
Well, it's true, I want to be able to use my blood like you do. Trust me, Imoen, you don't. Yeah, don't get all patronizing, I know that avatar stuff was bad,
the girl conceded, as though turning in the physical embodiment of murder had been mere triviality.
But you had lost your soul. You've had that back for an age, we should be equal now, like we used to be, but I'm always in your shadow. You are more powerful than me in your nature. Most of the time I just wave my sword about and hope for the best. Yes, but it's not that, is it?
Imoen pressed.
Look at the insane things you've done, it's like the fates really do have a plan for you. I say it drives me mad and it does, but I know you aren't just saying it, you really feel something, don't you? A bit,
Frithha conceded reluctantly.
I mean mostly it's just to wind you up.
Imoen snorted, their talk fading as they caught up their cups once more.
So,
continued Frithha,
are you still having the dreams?
A cool shrug.
They come and go, I sometimes sleep right through now, and when I don't. You were right.
The girl admitted frankly,
you do get used to them. You still chatting to Sarovic? On occasion. Anything useful to say?
Frithha imagined his indignant look with a smile.
No.
Imoen laughed, exclaiming to the indigo sky,
oh, aren't we a pair? I was just saying the same myself.
and the girls both turned as one to see 3 men of a similar age to them stood before the tavern doorway, all bearing the arms of mercenaries and identical grins. They were well built by their profession, with an insouciant vitality that smoothed over the few days' worth of stubble, scars, and long-healed broken noses. 2 were of the local coloring, one tall and lean of rather aquiline features, his stockier friend sporting a neat beard below his fleshy nose, while their fairer companion was striking in his disparity. His features were regular, plain even, if he were to be judged on that alone, broad face set with a straight nose and unremarkable hazel eyes, but with his sandy hair and tanned skin he was cast wholly in the same warm shade of golden brown. They were handsome, at least for men of that vocation, and they knew it, and from the appraising look Imoen was raking over them, at least one person was in agreement.
"Well, here is a sight,"
continued the tallest of them, thin lips parted in a smile beneath a rather beaky nose.
"A pair of pretty mates out for an ale, and we 3 here, good, honest men who've been deprived of any fairer company for the last 2 days."
Imoen's brow lowered to a critical frown.
"I hear there's plenty of company inside." "Indeed,"
reasoned his paler friend,
"but we find they have little care for talk, unless you are willing to pay for it. Besides,"
grinned the third, dark eyes shining,
"none are a patch on you two."
Imoen snorted.
"Don't let them catch you saying that, they'll charge you extra."
The men laughed, the stocky one adding,
"I can see you would be a handful. Only if you're very lucky."
More laughter, and she could see Imoen was warming to the role, the fairer man taking a step closer to crouch at the table and turn his smile to Fritha.
"Well, we already know who's the firebrand here, but what of your quiet friend? I swear, the last time I saw a maid so pale, she was cast in alabaster. And a half-elf, too,"
he added curiously, noting the ear tips that peeked through her curls.
"How exotic. We have a few men of your kin here among the mercenaries, but no ladies. Tell me, are your ears as sensitive to touch as they say?"
Fritha really didn't know how to answer that. Imoen was not so dumbstruck.
"Really?"
came the theatrical cry, her mimed fan batted at him for his impudence.
"A lady's ears are her own private business. Come now, Hazel, you'll make the maid blush,"
warned his stouter friend. Perhaps he worried his boldness would see them all alone for the evening. "No such luck," Imoen snorted gleefully.
"Ha! It's been a while since a bloke's been able to make me blush, though you're welcome to try. So, we can join you?"
pressed the first man.
Imoen
laughed.
"Why not?"
Fritha smiled and dutifully hopped her chair closer to make room, ignoring the twinge of disappointment. She would have preferred to spend the evening cementing their tenuous reconciliation. The men added another ale pitcher to the table, chairs taken from the surrounding settings, while the stouter man found a place on the low wall next to them.
"Right then, I'm Geruld,"
introduced the first, nodding to his companions,
"and this is Yvette and Hazel."
"Imogen," offered Imoen by reply, thumb thrown carelessly next to her,
"and this is Freya." "Well met."
Geruld laughed, raising his cup, and they all joined the salute, ale drained and refilled in that formality which always seemed to break the ice.
"So,"
continued Hazel,
"what brings you to the charming village of Amcathran?" "We're ballspawn,"
said Imoen. Geruld was nodding wisely.
"I figured as much, the merc women have a certain look to them."
Fritha snorted, how little they knew.
"And you?"
continued Imoen.
"Coin," said Yvette. "You're not doing a lot to discredit the view outsiders have of your lot." "No,"
Yvette laughed.
"I don't suppose we are. So why'd you ballspawn all come here anyway?" Our leader, Melissan, brought us from Saradush,
offered Fritha quickly. If there was a backstory here to be fabricated, then she wanted control of authorship. She's working to find a way to save us, and keep Bal from being resurrected. Imoen nodded and helped herself to more ale.
I guess this was the most remote place she could find to hide us in the meantime.
Geruld whistled through his chipped teeth.
Sounds like she's got her work cut out for her. Half of the Tetheran army is out for your lot, though you've no worries here.
He added quickly.
Balthazar made it clear he doesn't want any conflict brought to the village, and he pays well enough to keep my tongue. Why has he gathered you all here?
Asked Imoen.
I don't know. I doubt any merc here does. But each 10th day Balthazar opens his coffers and here we stay, awaiting his orders. To tell the truth,
said Ivek,
it's making some of us a mite restless, not knowing. A few groups left last week, heading west for an army that's supposed to be amassing, though I imagine we'll remain a while yet. You're all from same company,
confirmed Imoen.
Aye,
said Geruld.
There's us 3 and another 20 or so all out of Dar Omar.
He pointed to the dull red hawk's foot that had been stenciled onto the pauldron of his beaten leather armor.
The red talons. We're mostly of those who left the city guards, who found the work too dull, or the coin too meager, though some, like our Hazel, came from further afield. Our company is still based there, but we left 2 months back now to join the conflict at Saradush. For the silver chalice, you understand,
interrupted Ivek.
Not that giant's lot. Aye, but the knights weren't hiring, and the whole thing had blown over in under a 10-day. We were hired as guards by caravan train back to Dar Omar, when we heard rumors that an army was being raised to fight a force of dragons and jinn. Some Kalimshite ballspawn was amassing in the desert, and here we came to find one, if not the other. Balthazar certainly wants an army,
continued Ivek,
though what he intends to fight is still a mystery. Whatever it is, the wait is making me uneasy. Another 10-day and I'm quitting whatever the captain says.
The man downed his drink with a decisive gulp, Geruld shrugging his own thoughts on the matter as Hazel turned a mild smile upon Fritha.
As you can see, easy coin to some is tedium to another. Besides this, much of the mercenaries' wealth comes from spoils taken from the battlefield, and some here feel, though the work is without risk, Balthazar's pay does not cover the fine armors, swords, other potential lootings of a fallen army. As for myself, the challenge promised by such enemies rumored has proved lacking so far, though some of your kin who live on the desert's edge spoke of seeing dragons on the horizon. Perhaps we will face them yet.
Fritha took a long drink and avoided Imoen's eye, her friend just as quiet as she took a deep and sudden interest in her own cup, lips pressed tight against the smirk.
But, we likely bore you with tales of the soldier's life,
Hazel conceded at their silence.
Tell me, where are you from?
The question had been addressed to Fritha, though they both answered him.
Bergost,
chorused in the tired lie.
It's a town in western Heartlands, not far from Baldur's Gate,
Imoen added to give a point of reference for those who may not know the land. Geruld nodded, taking a long draught of ale.
Ah, I think everyone heard of the trouble you had up there recently, the iron going rotten and the threatened war with Shame nothing came of it. Tether could have used the opportunity to make a land grab to the north. Kings always pay well. I guess you can't win them all,
said Fritha dryly. She knocked back her cup and reached for the pitcher. Hazel beat her to it.
Please, let me. So you're both from the same town, then,
continued Ivek brightly.
What are the odds? What do you expect?
Laughed Imoen.
We are sisters. Well, half-sisters,
added Fritha as the pair fell to snickering. Geruld barked a loud laugh.
A classic ballspawn joke, was that? Well, you've got to laugh, haven't you?
Sighed Imoen, reaching for more ale. Hazel took up the pitcher without a thought, it seemed. A smile flashed to Fritha as he topped up both their cups.
So what brought two girls so far from home?
Asked Ivek.
Our mother was originally from
offered Fritha, ready with her tale.
Well, Imogen's mother anyway. I found a home with the family much later. But mother was from a fact widely known by the town, and, as war brewed, she worried what would become of us. We traveled back to Uthkatla with her, and stayed a time with our grandparents. It was there we heard of Melisande and her work to find a way to save the children. We followed her to Saradush,
explained Imoen,
and after the city fell we came here with the survivors. We hardly see the woman now, though, and Lucaille usually sends us on errands into the desert, trading with the tribes there for supplies we need.
Geruld snorted.
It seems we're both stuck here waiting for fate to get its arse moving, though I imagine we're having an easier time here than you lot. Not many ways for you, Ballspawn, to make your way here unless you like washing and sewing for dogs like us. Did you have trades back in I was a scribe,
offered Fritha promptly.
And I was a member of a local troupe at the Five Flagons Theatre.
Fritha rolled her eyes. This was why Imoen was not allowed to make up her own lies.
Oh ho, men, we're sharing ale with a famed lady of the stage. Nothing like that,
the girl hastened.
Just small speaking roles or parts in the chorus, and I helped mother in the shop when she was busy. A shop?
Asked Hazel.
What did you sell? Our grandparents owned a pottery in the promenade,
answered Fritha quickly. Imoen took a consoling swig, seemingly disappointed by the ordinariness of it.
A sound trade,
offered Hazel politely. Ivek laughed.
And you would know, Sembian. You are from Sembia,
confirmed Fritha.
Not really. My family came south when I was 4. We had been wealthy merchants, so I am told, though my father was forced to escape some trouble he will not speak of even now. We had distant family in Dar Omar, so there we settled and rebuilt what had been lost. My father wished for me to take over our trade, importing rare woods for the city's craftsmen, but I had no aptitude for it. Don't listen to him, girls,
laughed Ivek.
There's not a man in our company with such a silver tongue.
Agreed Geruld.
Remember the time he saved Jassim's hide? Another merc from our lot and one foolish enough to enter a game of cards with guards from the Assism's Hawks trading coster, and try to cheat them. They were out to take recompense in blood and it seemed nothing else would suffice when Hazel, here, managed to convince them, and the watchman they'd bribed to take their side of it, to just let him go.
Ivek was chuckling.
The ungrateful lout didn't much appreciate your argument though, so useless at cards that even cheating only saw him breaking even, not even worth their efforts to kill.
Fritha felt impressed despite herself.
Really?
Hazel shrugged, surprised by her interest.
Though I trust my skill with a blade, I prefer to talk my way out of trouble if I can. My father brought my sister into the business in the end, and as for me, I had been spoiled by my elder cousin's tales of battle and glory, but the guards in Dar Omar were too dull and the silver chalice too regimented. Eventually I found the talons. And right glad we were, too,
grinned Ivek, with a hearty slap to the man's shoulder.
Geruld and I are both of the guards, though he's not native to the city. I'm from Sarsid, a few leagues to the north, though I doubt you would have heard of the place. No,
said Fritha.
We kept to the main road to Zasepar for most of our journey. Zasepar,
Geruld sighed.
I know it well, used to have a lady there. We were to marry and all that. What happened?
Asked Imoen.
Well, after she moved to Dar Omar, she found she liked me a lot better when there was over 100 leagues between us. Poor love,
teased Imoen.
At the risk of breaking your heart again, I'm afraid I'm taken. But Freya here is free as a bird, though you may have some trouble from our company. No offense, my flower, but I don't fancy pressing my suit to a girl with as many angry brothers as you.
Frithla laughed along with the table. Unwelcome though they had been to begin with, she was warming to their company.
Here, let's have a game of cards, shall we?
Offered Ivek, pulling a battered wallet from his pocket.
Sanka, or ruin the guild. I don't think we can match you, if we're playing for coin,
ventured Frithla. Well, they were supposed to be impoverished ballspawn.
It is hardly the same thrill, if we are not going to play for something,
gripped Hazel.
Why?
Snorted Geruld.
We get more gold every 10 days and nothing more here to spend it on.
Behind Imoen's eyes, something sparked.
I know, why don't we play for dares? Imogen, I really don't think. Dares.
Cut in Geruld.
Freya and me used to play for dares when we were younger. Like I'll open with a stake if I have to blow the next boy you see a kiss.
Ivek was laughing.
Kissing, I like the sound of this.
And then the next to play would be all
I'll see your kiss and raise it to dancing on a table. Let's just play for drinks,
offered Frithla vainly.
Any losers have to down their drinks. Or both.
Cried Ivek.
Any who bow out early have to down their cups, the last loser has to do the dare. Yeah.
Enthused Imoen. Frithla kept her mouth shut this time, she was just giving them ideas. Next to her, Hazel looked just as pleased as she was.
Truly, can we not just play for coin? It can be copper, if you wish, I'll even cover these ladies' losses.
His offers were ignored. Frithla sent him a commiserating smile as Ivek shuffled the talus deck.
Right, my friends, 7-card Sanka, the fool is high.
Frithla rolled her jaw, her face stiff from too much smiling, Hazel still laughing as he topped up their cups with the heavy wine they had ordered a while back. Imoen was holding court on the table opposite with their much expanded company. A half-dozen red talons had arrived to join their brothers an hour or so back.
So Geruld sends a wink to me, whips behind him and sets to running again, pretending he's caught sight of the guards who are still in pursuit. Ivek and our brothers immediately hare off in the opposite direction and half of them end up throwing themselves into the nearest midden to hide. The men didn't speak to us for the next 10 days.
Frithla smiled, as amused by his laughter as she was by the tale.
You have a good camaraderie, better than most mercenary bands I would imagine. Yes, the Red Talons are known in the city for their loyalty, for many of us it is the only family we have. Much like yourselves, I suppose. And I have many such tales as these, though none quite compare as to watching you dance earlier.
Frithla laughed along with him.
I told you all I was useless at Sanka, at least I didn't have to smell the table's armpits. Though after a few days without any means to wash, I think we got the more embarrassing end of that dare.
Hazel was almost choked with laughter.
And your Imogen desperately splashing wine under her arms.
More laughter, the pair finally calming to leave them breathless and beaming at each other. Hazel seemed a lot more handsome than she first remembered. Frithla was blaming the wine, the man keen to make a similar observance of his own.
You were so quiet when we first arrived, though I thought I saw some spark in you. I am glad to see I was right, even if my first attempts to tempt it out ended in a scolding. Well, I give you full credit, impudent or not,
she giggled.
I swear, I've not laughed so much in a long while.
She raised her cup to toast him, taking a sip and managing to slop half the mouthful down her chin, coughing and spluttering as the sharp wine hit the back of her throat. Hazel sent her a concerned look.
Freya. Nothing, I just missed my mouth,
she croaked hoarsely. The man grinned.
A feat in itself.
They laughed together, Fritha taking another longer draught of wine to calm her throat, and a warm silence descended between them. Imoen was still playing cards with Gerult, Ivek, and the other men, her loud laughter rippling across the courtyard, and Fritha leaned back, letting her drifting gaze find patterns in the stars above. Hazel rattled his chair closer, reclining as she had.
Do you know anything of the stars?
Fritha shrugged.
A little.
An arm clothed in fine calamshite linen raised to the fat diamond that glittered directly overhead.
In Sembia, they called that bright one the Dragon's Eye. Have you ever been back to Sembia? No, though perhaps one day I will. With tales of vanquished dragons and the sword of a djinn,
she teased.
And many more scars no doubt,
he added wryly.
Will you return north after all this? I don't know,
she lied,
perhaps.
He must have noticed something change in her tone though, the man turning to her with a frown she had seen many times on a very different face.
The future worries you, does it not? What it holds for you and the other of your kind. Perhaps here is not the safest place for those who would escape such a fate.
Fritha smiled, eyes back on the table.
You are not the first to tell me so, but there is work here to be done and I must have a hand in it. Could you return to Sembia and let another fight your battles?
He did not need to answer. Fritha shifted her weight to catch up her cup again, downing the last of the wine within and bypassing the half-empty bottle to cup her cold hands about the lukewarm pot of tea they had ordered a while back.
I'll be feeling this tomorrow,
she sighed, a glance thrown to where Imoen was laughing in her triumph.
We should make a move soon.
Hazel smiled, noting her hands and edging closer to throw his cloak about them both.
Tarry a while yet. Tomorrow is a whole night away and besides, I enjoy your company more than any I have met in a long while.
Her back stiffened, the feel of him so close familiar and yet different enough to unease her.
You are kind to say so.
His smile softened, the man reaching forward to let light fingers trace along the back of her hands.
And yet I would share more than words with you, if I may. I have a room in one of the abandoned homes nearby, and I would like to spend the rest of the night there with you.
Fritha shrugged off his cloak and drew her hands back, rubbing the palms together firmly against the sudden chill.
Thank you, but I don't really think that would be a good idea. There is someone else.
He pressed. Fritha snorted.
Does there need to be? You are saving yourself then. Certainly not.
Hazel laughed gently at her vehemence.
I understand. You probably think me poor suitor for asking, but in this life I have found when fortune brings such rare joys to me, it is best to seize them with both hands. But do not mistake me, the suddenness of my offer does not mean I am careless in the act, and there is no pleasure that is not a shared one. If your kin and mine are to remain here a while, then perhaps many a dawn could find us thus entwined. I am not ashamed to say I have had my share of intimacies.
He leaned forward, putting that golden fringe to good use as it fell casually over penetrating amber eyes.
I will draw such sighs from you, they will be stifled only by the kisses of our passion.
Fritha dropped her burning face to her hands, perhaps it was the wine, but she was almost tempted. Oh, bloody hell!
Thank you, Hazel, but no, really, you're lovely, but, no.
The chair rattled back over the uneven flags as she rose.
Come on, Imogen, it's time we got back. What? No.
Fritha took the wine bottle from the table before her. Imogen knew where her loyalties lay.
Oh, all right then, see you later, lads.
The chorus of goodbyes echoed away from them, swallowed by the general clamor as they stepped from the terrace and strolled back through the empty streets. Fritha held the bottle tightly, glad for something real in her reeling senses. A yearning she could not quite place throbbed all through her chest, tinged with a melancholy realization that she and Imogen had swapped a true reconciliation for enough ale that neither of them cared to be cross anymore. Perhaps she should have taken Hazel up on his offer. Next to her, Imogen was weaving along the street, the girl almost ending up on her back as she threw her head skyward for a deep sigh.
Here, let's have some of that wine then. Ah, that's better. Did we have to leave then? I was just starting a winning streak. It's best we get back now, while we can still walk,
Fritha added as she snatched the girl's arm to prevent another stumble. Imogen was grinning.
Oh, So it had nothing to do with what you and Hazel were talking about.
In her face, Fritha felt the heat rising. Imogen had her answer.
Ah, I knew it.
The girl squealed. All evening it was all, oh, let me pour that for you, Freya.
What fine hands, face, nose hair you have, Freya.
Imogen took another swig, really settling in for her gossip.
So, what did he say then?
Fritha shook her head.
He offered to draw from my mouth lingering sighs of pleasure with passions that would take us to the dawn. And you said no.
Imogen cried, throwing a glance behind as though tempted to go over there and offer herself.
He's lovely. Honestly, Fritha.
She continued, a disturbing matronly tone sneaking in,
you must be curious by now. You're over 24 summers and still a virgin, it's getting a bit creepy.
Fritha laughed tiredly, surprised she didn't exhale steam with the heat in her face.
So I should just lie with the first bloke who asks me, should I? Besides, he can't take my virginity, no one can, because I've already given it. What?
The girl cried, instantly realizing this was not the most pressing question.
Who?
Fritha drew a deep breath and...
Cellophane.
Imogen's face was a picture of astounded delight.
No. When did that happen? In the Underdark.
A smile quirked the girl's lips, Imogen chuckling away to herself as she took another drink.
You almost had me then. I'm not joking. Fritha, you can't expect me, he was an evil drow, possibly our enemy, and you barely knew him. Actually,
Fritha corrected briskly,
we had been working together for a 10-day, which, as I recall, was longer that you knew Niklos. No, we are not bringing that up and, anyway, that was completely different.
Fritha snorted.
As you say.
A silence fell between them, comfortable and much warmer than the air that stirred along the dark street, the light of their campfire just a newly risen star upon the distant hillside. At her side, Imogen shivered and slipped an arm through her elbow, sharp chin dipped to rest on her shoulder.
So, what was it like? I didn't think you would need it explained to you. Very funny. I mean, how many? Once,
Fritha cut in, the heat was rising again and not merely in her face.
Just the once. Never since. Did it hurt? I know sometimes the first time. Not so I noticed. Come the moment, I was very...
The heat in her face burst to leave her throat hoarse,
aroused.
Imoen gave a snort somewhere between amusement and jubilation.
So?
She pressed, bright and eager. Despite her embarrassment, Fritha felt the smile curl, back in that room and lost in the feelings of another girl.
Well, it was nice. I mean, physically, it was incredibly nice, urgent and primal, and intuitive, too, like my body knew what to do. It was the first time I had felt alive in a long while. Solifane, well, he didn't know I wasn't a drow, of course, but... But
at the same time, it had not, still did not, feel like it had been her. She had been Valdrin, in another body with another mind and no one's soul. The act not for affection or desire or even curiosity, but just to prove a point. Fritha shook herself and reached for the bottle.
Here, let's not talk of this anymore, Imoen, it's making my stomach twitchy and I've got to share a tent with the man. Ah, you and Solifane.
Her friend giggled fondly.
I mean, I always suspected. The way you two, and those looks he sends you when you are turned away. I don't know what you're babbling about, it was just a one-time thing.
Imoen scoffed.
Yeah, whatever you say. I tell you, the way he looks at you sometimes, if I caught Val's looking at me like that I'd go squiffy in my lady bits. Oh, gods, Imoen, just shut up. I'm not listening. If I've had to put money on who before you had said, it would have been on a nomen,
the girl continued matter-of-factly.
I suppose that's not likely to ever happen now though.
Fritha sighed, all at once sobered.
No. He said he wished he had never met me. Awful thing is, I do too. Poor man, Brianna played upon his past regrets. Ha, you could play a nomen like Snakes and Ladders.
Imoen turned to eye her curiously.
Did you love him? Yes,
Fritha admitted without hesitation.
How could I not? At the time, he was safety and warmth in a cold, dangerous world. But now, I still love him in a way, for how he sees me, forgives me, just accepts me as I am, or at least he used to. But I never liked him for him.
Fritha shook her head.
It isn't good enough and he deserves some happiness. You know, for all Brianna's lies, I think her regard was more genuine than mine.
Imoen just nodded, raising the bottle for another long swig. Fritha caught the end before she managed to drain it.
Hey, go steady with that stuff, it's stronger than it looks.
Ah, I'll worry about it tomorrow. Tonight, it's just me and you and all the wine in Kalimshan. Come on. There were 3 drunken maidens come from the Straits of Grite. They drunk from first day morning, nor stopped till 9th day night. Jahara let the book rest in her lap. It was one of Fritha's better romance novels, though it still did little to hold her attention and she had only brought it from her pack to help her ignore the awkward silence over camp. A noman was opposite and brooding into the fire. She had definitely plucked the short straw, taking the first watch with him. Poor man. 2 loves both lost within the space of a year and neither through any fault of his. Jahara considered herself very blessed to have even met Khalid. The slap of canvas behind her, Valigar's braided head emerging from one of the tents, his clothing lacking the crumpled look that came with sleep.
You are still awake. I could not sleep,
he sighed, throwing down the cloak he had dragged out with him, bared feet leaving neat footprints on the dusty ground. His hand had been without its bindings for a day or so now, the fingers swollen and gnarled, hatched with pale scars a noman's prayers could not fade. Jahara watched him flex them stiffly.
Is your hand troubling you? No, no.
He dismissed, more sheepish as he added,
it is more that I find I am missing something.
Jahara shared his smile. She had been the same when some mission would call Khalid away, the woman unable to settle at night until he was returned.
Well, I hope they are not much longer, we have an early start. So, we still plan to set out for Sendai on the morrow,
confirmed Valigar. Jahara shrugged.
As it stands, this army will have to be stopped whether it aids Melisande in the long term or not,
added Anoman quietly. Jahara sighed, keeping to herself her wonders about whether or not some truce could be called while Melisande was dealt with. Unlikely, but something to keep in mind nevertheless. The sound caught her sharper ears before the two men could note it. Jahara inhaled a deep, comforting breath of wood smoke-scented air and smiled.
I think they are back.
Valigar and Anoman glanced up, the distant strains that had first alerted her finally reaching them.
So where are your feathered hats, your mantles rich and fine? They've all been swallowed up, my friends, in tankards of good wine. And where are your maidenheads, you maidens, brisk and gay? We left them in the alehouse, we drank them clean away.
And there they were, the pair leaning into each other and weaving from the darkness, faces pink from ale and the climb both.
Hello, you two, did you have pleasant evening?
Imoen broke from her friend, skipping over to bat playfully at the woman's shoulder-length hair.
Jahara, guess how many boys? Guess. Boys.
Fritha was snickering, the noise drawing Imoen's attention back to her.
And Fritha. Fritha danced on a table.
The girl's laughter ended there.
Imoen, you promised you wouldn't tell them. Oh, it was so brilliant and all the mercs were going mad and singing and Fritha was throwing her clothes off. Imoen. I took my scarf off, just my scarf. Yeah, calm down, Anoman, don't go getting any ideas.
Fritha winced, the man himself said nothing. Imoen did not notice either of them.
Vals. You waited up for me.
The man smiled, almost swamped by the enthusiastic embrace.
Yes, indeed, though I am more than ready to bed down. You don't have to ask me twice. Night, you lot.
Valigar's frown was audible as the pair moved off.
Imoen, perhaps you should take some water before you sleep. So, how was your evening here?
Asked Fritha of the two left, though she likely only expected an answer of one, the girl settling on the blanket next to Jahara.
Fine enough. Everyone is prepared to leave tomorrow and, on that note, you should likely follow Imoen's example. I'm all right for a bit yet. I can finish off your watch for you, if you like.
The woman seemed about to refuse, but thought better of it, ruffling her hair with a gentle hand as she left the circle. Anoman heard rather than saw the woman leave, eyes fixed upon the fire, that anger he had been feeling for days now smoldering like the embers there, the pulse of it matching every beat of his battered heart. The past few days had crept by with a brutal slowness that nothing could distract from. He could not read or take any distraction in talk or plans. Even sleep held no release, nights spent lying awake staring at the plain canvas roof of his tent, mulling over the hate that coursed through him. Why? Why had this happened to him? Everything he had suffered with his father, within the order and then at Fritha's hand, had been for nothing and the world cared not one jot. Brianna, a friend who had listened and shared his burdens, his only true comrade since the order cast him out, was not only dead, but had been using him all along. And if he ever needed final proof that life was an unfair, Cruel joke, it was sitting across from him there, leafing carelessly through the book Jahara had left. He had lost everything, and for what? So he could come to some distant land and watch Fritha die. His hiss started her.
How can you just sit there? Sorry. How can you go out and drink and sing and sit there, knowing what you know, knowing what will happen to you?
The girl shrugged, tapping the book absently against her knee.
I don't know. I suppose there isn't much else I can do.
Her casual acceptance of the thing made him all the more furious.
Gods, Fritha. I mean, how do you feel?
He cut himself dead, appalled at the idiocy of the question. How did he expect her to feel? Something like he did probably, dull and old and so very hollow whenever he looked her way.
I am sorry, that was.
It was strange to hear her laugh.
It's all right, Anomen, don't be embarrassed. As for how I feel, it's fine, I don't mind. Well, no, I do mind. I actually mind a bucket load, but it's as fine as it's going to be.
She dipped her face, her voice small but firm as she continued.
That was the reason, you know, that I ended things between us. I mean, ever since I knew I was chosen, I knew it couldn't be good. I didn't want to bring you into something so uncertain and then, well, you know what's going to happen now. Do I?
He sighed, rubbing a throbbing temple. He felt as though he had had a headache for days.
What does any of this mean? Pretty much what Alun said,
she murmured, clearly wary of the tents about them.
I'll die, more or less. I'll take the throne and become Baal, or I'll take it and become a god. I'm not sure how much of me will remain even if I manage to take the power for myself, but my life as I know it will end. The best I can hope for is that I ascend as the new god of murder and there is still enough of me left that I can be considered Fritha. Otherwise, perhaps the essence will drag me into someone new, or Baal will have enough power to resurrect himself in me. Of course.
She added with forced cheer,
I could still die beforehand and then all this will fall on someone else. But Alund had enough faith to follow me down here, so perhaps I am assured of survival, one way or another.
Elund. Anomen noted everyone had begun to call her that, as though they could pretend she was a different woman to the one who had duped them all with such ease. He sighed deeply.
I was so taken in. We were all taken in, Anomen. She was believable because for the most part she was telling the truth. I know she came here for me, but I think she really did feel for you.
Don't, he cut in sharply.
You can say nothing to make this better.
Brianna was dead, and considering the many ways in which things could have been different just made it worse. A gust of wind stirred the embers to send a cloud of fireflies skyward. Fritha pulled her knees to her chest.
I always knew I would break something I couldn't fix eventually. I'm sorry I pushed you away before, Anomen, I should have been honest. But I just couldn't tell you, not about all this. You thought you were acting for the best,
he intoned in the expected platitude. Fritha took no comfort from it anyway.
I should have done better. I let you down.
Tears were beginning to well, the girl dipping her face to hide them behind a hand. Within Anomen, the emptiness swelled.
Fritha, crying will change little. I'm not crying, not really,
she dismissed, already dashing the tears away.
I just get so frustrated with myself. I always seem to realize just what I wanted after everything's changed and it's no longer the case. I didn't even want you to leave Sultanaseller. But, I let you go, I thought it would be better.
Anomen shrugged.
Perhaps we were never meant to be.
Fritha clearly didn't know what to say to that, a wet laugh bubbling up to fill the silence as she mopped at her face.
Ah, by the time I work it out this time, it really will be too late, won't it? Life was always such a slow thing. Back in Candlekeep, I didn't realize how much faster the world moves. Lives and people rattle on so quickly, I blink and they're gone, different. Was it being raised in Candlekeep or the elf in me that is so slow to change? I don't know, and now.
She glanced to him, eyelashes still beaded with tears.
And now I don't have time left to work it out.
End of chapter.